Hello, welcome back to Viewfinders. I'm your host, Graham Dargy, and I want to start off this week by taking a minute to say a big thank you to everyone who's listened to the show these last few weeks. The response to the first few weeks of the podcast has really been incredible, and it takes a lot of time and effort to put these podcasts together, and you don't know how it's going to go. Just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge everybody. There's been hundreds of downloads, great response to the really amazing guests that I've had on the show, and so I'm just feeling really grateful about that. So wanted to drop that in today. Also wanted to let you know what I've been up to the last week or so, and maybe I'll make this a regular thing on the show. This last week I've had a few great conversations for future episodes with some brilliant photographers from around the world. I spoke with Eric Paré. He's a light painting photographer from Montreal, probably, well, to me, the best in the world at what he does with light painting. A really interesting episode. You're going to hear that probably in January. I also spoke to Brian Hodges. He's a travel and documentary photographer from California, lives in Australia. I love this guy's photography, and you're going to love it as well. And we had a really incredible conversation. Well, he gave an incredible conversation, an insight into what he does and why he does it, and some of the amazing experiences he's had in Papua New Guinea and Uganda, Brazil, Mexico. Really interesting guy, so I'm really excited to share that with you. And the other one that I recorded this week was with a headshot photographer from London called John Clark. And John must be the best at what he does in London. I'm convinced of that, having looked around. Tons of experience, but a really interesting guy. So I'm really looking forward to sharing that one as well. Also, in the last couple of weeks, I did a camera club talk on Zoom, as is the way nowadays. And had a couple of photography jobs as well. Did like an industrial thing here in Aberdeen. And I just did a headshot shoot at the weekend for a performer's, like a casting headshot. Which was really good fun shoot as well. So that's what I've been up to in this last week or so. So how about you? What have you been up to? What have you been photographing? I'd love to connect with you. If you want to find me on Instagram, YouTube and Facebook, that would be great. And reach out and let me know that you find me through the podcast. And I'd love to see your photography there too. So drop me a line. Before we start, let me invite you to share the show with your photography friends. Subscribe on your favourite platform, and if you like, leave a 5-star review. That's the best way to help me get the show in front of more listeners, and it's really, really appreciated. Okay, on to today's show. My guest this week is Nick Tucker. Nick is a wedding photojournalist based in East Sussex in England, and Nick was named as one of the top 30 rising stars in world wedding photography by Rangefinder Magazine. He approaches his work from a storytelling angle, and his photojournalistic style captures all the quirks and eccentricities of his client's wedding day as he shoots what he calls the high-end snapshot. Our conversation covers Nick's previous career working for Banksy, how he got into wedding photography, and the advice that gave him the confidence to shoot his own unique style. This follows on nicely from my chat with Valda Bailey last week, because Nick's wedding photography lies out with the mainstream. Wherever you're at with your photography, especially if you feel the call to shoot something a little bit differently, I'm sure you're going to take something away from this episode. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with Nick Tucker. Hi Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Graham. Thank you very much.
So, are you based in London, is that right?
I've just recently moved out to the south coast, but all my work, or when my work exists, is basically London-based, yeah.
Okay. And so how far is that for you now?
So I live near Hastings in East Sussex, so about an hour and a half into London, so it's
okay.
Easy commute, really, if it's, once a week for, the glorified Saturday job that weddings are.
Okay. I'm sure that we all know there's more to it than that, but okay, well, I'll ask you before we get into it to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your photography.
Yeah, so I'm Nick Tucker, primarily wedding photographer, weddings and events, I guess high-end parties they would be. I've been doing this for pretty much 10 years now.
We have a mutual friend, and Hazel, and she's a friend of mine. She's my very good friend here, and she's been in the wedding industry as well.
Mm.
And when I was looking for a wedding photographer for the slot for this show, I didn't look anywhere else. Hazel has so much good things to say about you, and
Oh,
so I thought, well, we'll go with Nick. And when I look at your photography, it's not your standard wedding photography. To me, it seems it's got a very photojournalistic kind of vibe, a very authentic feel, and I would say there's a real intimacy to it, which I think comes from to the way that you shoot, which we'll
yeah.
kind of get into later. But before photography, you were a writer, is that right? Can you tell us a bit about that career?
Yeah. So I was a struggling writer for the most part. I had an agent. I was writing or attempting to write novels from sort of my late 20s through to 30s. I had an agent, and I had two books that were nearly sold to two publishing houses, but ultimately they weren't. So then I was sort of kicking tires on in the writing for a long time. But then I did have one little kind of um, interesting phase when I see you've got a kind of a Banksy image behind you
Hmm.
on your wall. I wrote for Banksy for a little while, which was fun.
So do you know the real identity, or how does that
No,
work?
no, because I when I joined them, it's more than one person really. When I joined them, he was already the mythical Banksy figure. So they were very protective and very guarded about his identity, even with people working for him. So there was an inner circle and an outer circle, and I was only ever allowed in as far as the outer circle.
Okay. So is that just a conscious thing that they're doing just to build mystery and intrigue around the brand?
I think absolutely is. Yeah, and it's very successful. I mean, I think they're a team. There's certainly a central guy with who started it all, but I mean, they're now an ideas team. They're an arts team. It's not one person, and
Mm.
that person, is in his 50s, which doesn't play quite so well to the rogue maverick image I think that we have.
Mm.
I think this way he stays forever young. You know.
Indeed. So what kind of work were you doing there?
I was writing his newsletter, but they would at that one point when they were selling prints, it wouldn't just be Banksy prints; it would be prints for other artists in his sort of stable. But they didn't want a serious image, so my job was to be basically professionally sarcastic about the art and the artists that were coming out.
Okay.
So.
And so, do you have training in journalism or something like that?
No, 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 no. It's just something that I was always enjoyed. Uh, my degree is in film, but that's more cinema. Um, MA in creative writing, but that was almost after the fact, hoping to possibly teach as a result of that career. But sort of no training in journalism, and no training really in photography.
And so, I was really curious to find out where your sense of narrative comes from. Is it from that film degree, do you think?
I think it's from the idea of storytelling. Um, I'd always wanted to be when it was film, when it was cinema. It still was the idea of screenplays. Um, so it's always been, how do you tell a story? What small telling detail speaks for more than just simply that thing in and of itself. And I
Mm.
think that applies, that transfers across to the way that you look at people and the way you look at photographs.
So, in terms of the film, who would your big influences be in that area?
Oh God, well, I was always very into sort of indie cinema, so it wasn't like I guess I mean everyone from like Patrice Leconte, who was quite an interesting French filmmaker of the sort of, I guess, the 80s, 90s. Um, I don't really have a top 10 of anyone. Just I think just images and ideas and ways of seeing filter in.
So from the film to the writing, where did the photography interest start in that sort of timeline?
I mean, I did it as A level, but I did it fairly badly as an A level. Um, and yeah, I mean, you would look back at my portfolio from then, and kind of think, well, yeah, I'd try something else if I were you. Um, that was all in film, and I think what digital has given people is the ability to try and to fail, and for it not to cost anything,
Mm.
and to see those results straight away without the need of a dark room or film costs. Um, so I took up film again, sort of post street art time, just just because I had a bit of money from it, and I got talked into buying a better camera than I needed as a hobbyist. Um, Took photos, put them up on Flickr. At some point, because Flickr was a thing back then. At some point, someone said, you know, you can love the images. Would you photograph our wedding? Um, I said no because that's way too much pressure, and I'd never been. I don't think I'd have really been to a wedding or seen a wedding photographer at work. But I did go along as a guest with a stupidly nice camera. Um, Kind of the bane of the wedding photographer's life, um, and just shoot, for them, for myself, and whether or not they were just being kind, they at the end of it they said they preferred my photos to the guy that they paid £3,000 or £4,000 for.
Mm.
So at that point, with writing not really going anywhere, you think, well, here's an avenue. Just kicked off from there.
Okay, so were you, just so I'm clear on that, were you shooting that with a film camera?
No, no, that was digital.
Okay,
That was like the first Canon 5D.
okay. And so those from those early shots, were they still in the same? Would that be recognizable to the style that you're shooting now, or how has it developed from there?
I think I mean, you could trace a through line. I think the way I was looking at people was probably similar, but I think I did. I shoot very wide now, um, and I think I didn't have the confidence back then to compose a shot with multiple facets in it. So it'd be
Mm.
much more your 50 mil, sort of closer up kind of one person, one shot kind of deal.
Mm. That was really what struck me about your work, because I can see that you're shooting with a wide lens, and this, to me, that just makes me uncomfortable. I'm an introvert. I don't want to be in people's body spaces. If I'm shooting an event like that, I'm
Yeah,
hanging back with a long zoom lens, and I'm going to wait and watch and pick out the moments from back over there.
yeah,
And so when I see how close, and that's what I mean by the intimacy in your shots, how close you're into the action, um, I just think, well, I'm impressed by that you have the confidence to put yourself in there, and also I think the way of composing a shot with a wide lens is harder, because like you said, you're going to have multiple things going on in the frame.
yeah.
Um, so is that you sort of suggested that came with confidence? So how did you journey more towards shooting closer to people with that wide lens?
Um, yeah, I think it evolved over time. There was no conscious decision. When I started, my go-to lens was a 50 mil, which gives you know, generally tighter shots. Tends to be the way that you'd have one subject there. Um, but I think that that works for portraits. But then when you're at a wedding and it's a chaotic live event, there is much more going on. So yeah, I think I just wanted to capture more of that. But I do remember buying a 35mm, which obviously is not wide. I remember the first time I used a 35mm, I didn't understand it.
Mm.
Everything seemed too far away, and um, yeah, no, I think I bought a 35mm and then I put it back in the kit bag for, a couple of weddings, a few months, whatever, and then took it out one day, and suddenly something just clicked, and I was like, oh, okay, no, I get it,
Mm.
you know, and then it just transitioned from there.
Okay, so well, we'll get into your lenses and things later, but I think I'm still at that point with a wide lens. Still don't get it, but so but I think again it comes to sort of personality as well. Are you quite happy and comfortable to be in about close to people shooting like that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm an extrovert, but I'm not shy either. And I think actually, probably the middle ground is ideal. If you're too shy, you're maybe you're standing back and not getting involved at all. If you're too much of an extrovert, you're maybe imposing yourself on other
Mm.
people's day.
Mm.
Um, so I just kind of like try and float around somewhere in the middle.
Mm. And so from that first wedding, you took some confidence from the feedback that you got there. And so is that when you started to set your stall up and try and get more of that kind of work?
Yeah, yeah. So from that wedding, I think I then cast about and assisted on two weddings. For free as a second photographer. But then, beyond that, I kind of thought, well, okay, I get it now. I see what people are doing,
Mm.
um, and started, I think, charging um, on my fourth wedding.
So did you consider other avenues with photography at that point, or were you could see the path with the weddings?
Yeah, no, it just seemed the obvious path seemed to be the weddings at that
Okay.
point. Yeah.
And so from your, I'm curious about transferable skills and if there's anything from the background that we've spoken about with your degree and the writing, what transfers, it really transfers into your shooting?
I just think ways of seeing. I think perhaps the fact that I did study cinema closely, so in the sense is that you can see the way something is being framed and shot, and you can appreciate the work of different cinematographers. That then that just feeds the language of your head,
Mm.
um, and is assimilated that way. I don't think there's any conscious thing.
Mm.
It's just sort of it just absorbs.
So those early experiences with weddings, first of all, you're a guest and then you're
Hmm.
assisting a couple of times.
Yeah.
When you started to charge
Mm.
and you're the wedding photographer, did that change the dynamic for you at all, or are you just still just doing it the way that you're doing it?
I was always doing it the way that I was doing. I think it didn't change the dynamic from the ones I was assisting because I was assisting.
Mm.
So essentially, they're the main guys. They're wanting backup photography. So I didn't feel a stress to um, do what they were doing. I was subsidiary to them. Um, and I think the first ever wedding I charged for was still friends of friends. So I wasn't charging a hell of a lot. I think it may just have been it was a wedding outside Belfast. So I think I probably all that they did was they paid for the flight and accommodation for that one. So
Mm.
again, there's not that big stress. You're
Mm.
not suddenly going from nothing to charging the big bucks.
Mm.
That they're people that otherwise may or may not even have had a wedding photographer.
I started with weddings when I started in business,
Mm.
and the first ones that you do are friends of friends or your friend's brother or whatever,
Mm.
and you're doing it like you say for that kind of experience and just for the trip and stuff. But um, it's still something that can't be redone, and there's a certain pressure and excitement that comes with that, definitely an
Mm.
adrenaline that comes with that, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, and I know, and yeah, I think, I know that I messed up the walking back down the aisle shots on that very first one, because I had the sort of the shutters set slow for, it was dark church. It was set slow for the sort of the close up images of the two of them, and I'd forgot to change that back for them walking back down the aisle, and they were all unusable. Um, but one of the things that um, the first guy I assisted said to me is, look, you know, they're basically looking for 5 to 10 really lovely shots from from the whole day. Yes, they want an album, but in terms of what they're really going to save, either on the wall or just refer back to as their wedding photos, is going to be between 5 and 10 shots, and you've got all day to get that. They're not going to care which part of the day it comes from, as long as they have them. So then suddenly you have, suddenly that changes everything, and you go, well, I've got 8 hours to get 10 shots, and that really helped me. That was I think the best advice I've had.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think that's fantastic advice for anybody stepping into that
Yeah,
field.
yeah,
So with the wedding industry, I think maybe we've just sort of touched on this, but everything seems to be about there's a sort of perfection narrative, like the standard is that we're gonna provide you for your cake, your catering, your dress. It's gonna be like perfect.
yeah,
Your photography, and your shooting style is so kind of quirky, and some of the shots that you get are there's one where the bride is coming down the back steps of the bus, and and you can see her dress through the back window.
uh-huh.
um I can just see, this is my fear, the mother-in-law going, but you've cut her head off. And so I would be like second guessing myself all the way with that. But how do you sort of, I'm just wondering, I think I'm getting to the question, how do you crack into this sort of perfection narrative when your shooting style is so kind of authentic and photojournalistic like that? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, I do know what you mean. I think you just have. I think the fact is, I don't have another way of shooting. It is the way I shoot. I had there's a wedding photographer in Dorset called Bella West, and she sort of mentored me at the very beginning, and it was always the sort of I'd take sort of 10 shots to her, and she would throw 8 on the slash pile and say, I don't like these. And the two that that she would sort of hold on to would be like the grungier ones. And she was like, "Well, this is you. This is what you do. The rest of you is trying to do a style that, you know, is someone else's, or is just inauthentic, and you think you should be doing it." And she said, "Look, and she said at the time, I don't know if there's a market for this kind of thing in wedding photography, but this is the kind of photography that this is your photography."
Mm.
And again, that was great advice, and I think it just gave me the confidence to be bloody minded.
Mm.
And it's like, well, I guess I can't do the other stuff. Let's see if the stuff that I can do is sellable.
Mm. I do you feel, I'm just thinking when you said that, maybe a few years ago, maybe not a market for that kind, but I feel like the world has changed so much, and people crave authenticity much more than ever before, I think.
Yeah,
So I would feel like there's much more of an opportunity for that kind of shooting nowadays.
yeah, and I think the thing to do is have confidence in your own style, because you know as much as we all want to think that we are completely unique, and we're not. So the chances are, if a style, if you like a particular style, a number of other people will like that style too. So it's a question of finding them.
Hmm.
You know.
So let's get towards the camera in hand kind of stuff. So
Mm.
yeah, what I love about your photography, like I've said, the authenticity, realness, intimacy. There's a blend I noticed. I'm looking through the complete weddings on your site, of sort of some classic beautiful shots, and then these unexpected and funny offbeat kind of moments.
Mm.
Moments. that happen everywhere, but not everybody would shoot them, you know? So I
Yeah,
feel like you must be actively looking for those moments, um, and then trying to get yourself in the right place at the right time. And then you've got the camera in hand and you have to do the right thing with the camera once you get there. So I feel like there's sort of observation skills and camera skills, storytelling skills, which maybe cross between the observation and the camera skills. So maybe we'll deal with the two sort of things separately. Well, let's talk about your camera gear at the moment, and then we go into more of the storytelling side after
sure.
that. So what would be your go-to sort of camera and lens combination?
So I'm not a particular gearhead. So I think it seems to me that a huge swathe of the wedding industry has gone over to mirrorless, but I'm still shooting with a Canon 5D Mark III, which is a big old clunky beast.
Hmm.
But it's a good solid workhorse. Again, when I started out, I was quite a purist about lenses, and they had to be primes. But I
Hmm.
think Canon's 24-70 Mark II I think is a nice sharp lens throughout its range. Um, so I have that as the main go to, and as a slight luxury, I've got a Leica Q,
Hmm.
which is a fixed 28mm lens, which is lovely outdoors, but kind of a pain indoors. So it's great in natural light, but it's horrible in low light. So those are the two that I have on me.
Hmm. Are you shooting film at times? I think I've seen that on your blog.
I have shot. Yeah, I'm looking to do that more and more. When I was living in London, all the places that I knew to get film developed were wildly prohibitive. Um, So you'd be looking at around about £50 a roll if once you've
Hmm.
paid for the film and then got it
Wow.
scanned and high res, high enough to deliver. So which is just insane. So 2 rolls of film is £100, and so
Hmm.
there's that eats away at your margin unless you can add it on to the cost. And but a lot of people, you have to educate people, I think, in the terms of how film differentiates itself from digital.
Hmm.
So that would be something I'm looking to do more. Um, but no, for the most part, it's digital, and
Hmm.
yeah,
And in terms of lighting, have you got some flash firing at some point?
purely for the dance floor shots.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, soon as soon yeah, I work with low light for as long as possible, um, and sometimes that as long as possible just means how receptive people are to it, and often that could be how drunk they are. You
Hmm.
know, um, because a flash, you have to judge the balance between when a flash is going to be intrusive and when it's going to kind of announce itself as kind of like the party time that people
Hmm.
enjoy and pose for.
Hmm. So I think that you've hit on a good point there. There's a time of day that balance will tip, and it's
Yeah,
related to how many drinks people have had, I guess.
it is. Yeah, I mean you can. I mean I've noticed people that will spend the entire day with a sixth sense for where the camera is,
Mm.
avoiding you taking a naturalistic shot that will look lovely, and will just dodge it, and then you know 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, they're the ones jumping out in front of
Mm.
the lens to pose.
And so, just to get really, really nerdy here, I was interested to know about how you're using the camera in terms of the camera modes and the
Mm.
focus modes. I was just wondered how the best way to be quick, because you have to be quite quick on a wedding day, I think.
Yeah, I mean, during the day, just it was autofocus, which is very reliable. Um, and then in the evenings, I kind of take it off autofocus, but I shoot at you know quite a wide depth of field. So I think if you set the lens to sort of be in focus from about a meter and a half in front of you, and you're shooting a f8, f11, you're going to get most of the action in focus, and that way you don't rely on the camera to find its focus in order for the flash to go off, which can happen when it's on autofocus, and you then miss the moment.
That is a photojournalist's way of shooting, I think. F8 and be right in the action. It seems, and I thought this from looking at the weddings on your site, but there's sort of one way of shooting earlier in the day, and almost another way of shooting later in the day, and it's just to capture different kind of vibes, I guess. Would that be right?
To an extent, I'm still looking to shoot at around f8, 7.1, 6.3 in the day. I don't like the sort of soft focus, kind of like dreamy wedding look. I think it's a bit too uniform, and it doesn't lend itself to the things going on in the background. Brides getting ready and all that sort of stuff. So it's more dictated by what I can get away with. If they're getting ready in a low lit room where it is 2.8 or lower, then that will be the shot. But if they're getting ready in a big room with big windows, then I'll still be trying to shoot with a deeper depth of field.
And so are you working with a second photographer, or are you just on your own there?
Just me.
Okay. Yeah. And then so after the wedding, what is the expectation? What are you delivering to people? What do people want nowadays?
So less and less it's wedding albums, although I have the option is always there, and I've recently just done an album for someone that whose wedding I shot 3 years ago. It's not like there's a time limit, but people are looking for a digital files, so I deliver them as password protected online gallery that doesn't delete, so actually doubles as cloud storage, which is quite nice, because I have from back in the day I have had some bride and grooms kind of going, yeah, we've just moved house and we may have lost our wedding photos, and I've always been able to find them, dig around for them, but that's a kind of a clunky way to do it these days. It's just all on cloud.
And so when you go into shooting the wedding, is it possible to have images in mind? Because I know like another style of wedding photographer could go in with, they've got, these are the images that they do, and that's what people expect. Is it possible for you to have such a game plan in mind, or are you really just feeling it in the moment all the way through the day?
Really just feeling it. I mean, I don't want to go in with preset shots. There's the skeleton of the day, which will always remain the same, which is, getting ready, getting into the dress, probably getting into the car, getting out of the car, the ceremony, confetti.
So you have to kind of hit
speeches,
those marks through the day, right?
Yeah, but they're going to be hit. They are the day.
Yeah.
But they're not shots that I feel that have to be shot in a certain way. They just have to be captured. I'm much more interested in finding shots that I haven't shot before, and that. But I think that's not a difficult thing really. It's because it's a live event. Each one, I think, if you look at it in terms of, well, it's just another wedding, then you may well get back shots that look like just another wedding set of images. But if you're going into it going, well, it's a live chaotic event, this should be fun, there will always be those moments.
So you're just, antenna are out looking for those moments.
Yeah. I'm just I'm looking for the interactions between people, and I guess one of the skills that you have to maybe work on is, or intuit, is knowing when someone that you've never met before is putting on a bit of a performance for his friends, or she's standing in a certain way that you kind of go, "Oh, that's so XYZ." You've really captured her, and I think that's a question of just kind of like just being alive to the moment, and sensing those things in people.
Mm. So it seems to me that you really do need to be switched on all day, and for the way that you're shooting, there's not really the opportunity to sort of coast through and just kind of go through the motions if you're going to deliver what I think people would be expecting from you.
Yeah, no, you don't switch off for the entire day. Even yeah, no, I mean not once. It's kind of you do wake up the next day with a kind of like with a brain hangover, absolutely shattered from it.
But satisfied as well.
But satisfied, yeah. I mean, and I wouldn't have it any other way. People have, I've shot weddings where people have gone, "Oh, come on, look, it's late now, and I know we paid for you to be here to XYZ, but put your camera down for a while and have a drink." And I'll have a drink, but I won't put my camera down. Because it'd be more stressful to me to not get that shot.
Yeah, you'll see something happening and you'll be
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, this brings us to a fun round, which is called. This is the first time I'm trying this.
Okay.
And I'm going to put reverb on my voice when I say this. High contrast. Okay, so, and because I was looking through your site, and the two weddings that really caught my eye, and there seem to be completely different events. So there's the Whitstable Beach wedding. Do you know the one I mean?
Well, I think I've done a few of those. So
okay, there's the one that's got the sort of mobility scooter as the headline image.
Yes. Yeah.
And the bride has got quite a short dress above the knee.
Yeah.
And it's all very, British, quirky kind of seaside town vibe. And the other one, which you can't help but notice on your website, is the Monaco one.
Sure.
Or Monte Carlo.
Yeah.
Completely different vibe on those two events. And I was wondering, you have to shoot these completely different weddings. How do you approach those with equality, if you see what I mean? I mean, what are the parallels between those two different types and styles of weddings?
Well, I think the through line is documentary. You're responding on one hand to a British seaside event, with all the sort of the kind of like the quirks and idiosyncrasies that entails, and then on the other hand, you're shooting Immodesty Blaze in Monaco, who is kind of Britain's Dita Von Teese. And so, yes, you're shooting that with a documentary style, but the documentary is what you're documenting is a very, very glamorous setup. So it's not as if I could impose one style on the other. I can't make Monaco look like a British seaside, and I can't make British seaside look like Monaco. You're just responding to events in front of you in hopefully the most honest and authentic way you can.
And so, just looking into the Whitstable one, it's got this. You must know Martin Parr. I mean, it's got that kind of feel to the whole thing.
Yeah.
The commonality is just you being aware, doing your thing. You're not being intimidated by, oh my goodness, this would be me. I'm in Monaco. I'm shooting a big wedding here. There's a lot of money changing hands all around the place, and I need to make sure I deliver something really good quality. I would be losing sleep for this big time. And with the Whitstable one, I would probably, my clients won't want to hear this, but I'd be like, okay, this is a relaxed kind of event. I'm going to be fine,
Yeah.
Are you feeling those pressures as well? And
I mean, you are feeling the pressures, but at the same time, with the Whitstable one, it was a beautiful, sunny day, lots of characters, with the Monaco one, it was a beautiful sunny day with lots of characters. I mean, you are aware that there's a different audience for the two weddings. One is local and one is potentially global. So, but I think that, I mean, if you were to stop and think about that, you would probably curl up in the corner and rock for half the day. So what you do is you respond to the adrenaline and the excitement, and you are, I mean, what an amazing thing to have, to be able to photograph. So you may as well enjoy it.
Absolutely. Okay, so this brings us to another round, which is a quickfire round. And you're familiar with film cameras, so
Yes.
I decided to call this, I mean, let me know what you think. I'm open to changing it, but I decided to call this round Motor Drive, and I'm
Sure.
going to put reverb on that as well. So, because it's fast moving, that's my idea.
Okay.
So, okay.
I'll try not to waffle then.
Okay, wide angle or telephoto?
Wide angle.
Fast shutter speed or slow?
Fast.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Yeah, it goes with the fast shutter speed. I could see that coming. Head or heart?
Both.
Okay, good. What was the last great book, movie, series, or album you experienced?
I've just been getting back into the Rolling Stones' Exile on Main Street, and I watched a very good documentary about that. So, and
Okay.
that was obviously filmed by Robert Frank, who was a famous photographer.
I'll put links in the show note for these things. Expensive lens cloth or just the corner of your shirt?
I will have bought an expensive lens cloth, but I won't know where it is, so it'll be the corner of my shirt.
Yeah, same. What's a weird thing I could find in your camera bag?
Probably some random novel that I'm reading at the wedding breakfast.
And favorite photographer right now?
Probably right now, Todd Hido.
Todd Hido. And so what's he shooting?
He shoots on film. He landscapes, portraiture, but he puts his books together in the forms of almost scrapbooks. So there's a hodgepodge of style and mood and subject matter to them.
And what do you wish you'd known 5 years ago?
Not to sell all my Banksy prints.
All of us. So, what's the one thing you bought thinking it was a good idea, a photography thing, but you've never ever used it?
I did a wedding in Reykjavik one time, and I bought some underwater casing for the Blue Lagoon. And I got there, and the water is completely murky, and I also didn't trust myself to have secured the casing properly. Still don't, so still never used it.
Yeah, but when you bought it, that you were going to go in the water.
I was going to get these amazing shots, half out of the water, half underneath, beautiful art thing, and I still wouldn't try it now.
Yeah. And when do you feel at peace with the universe?
I think when I'm sitting down reading a good book, actually.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
We have to say we're recording this in the context of the pandemic and hugely uncertain times for anyone creative. So, I mean, I know we touched on this off air, but how do you see things going in the future? Is it easy to say how things will be, or impossible?
I think impossible. I don't think anyone knows. I don't think anyone knows at all.
Yeah, it's the same for me. I mean, it's just, and yeah, I think the government have decided not to support, creative arts type of
Across the
businesses.
board. Yeah.
Which is just seems completely senseless to me, because what are we living for if we don't have creative arts,
Yeah, and you'll get ministers that will quote that will pepper their speeches with Shakespeare or the classics, which was art, which needed to be funded back then. It doesn't, it comes from somewhere.
So yeah, okay, well, we'll wish you all the best. Where can people go to connect with you, support your work, and find out more about what you do?
So my website is nicktuckerphotography.com, and I have a fairly high profile Instagram, which is Nick Tucker Photo. Those are the two main spaces.
And just to round up, if there was somebody listening to this thinking they want to go into the wedding industry, they're interested in that photojournalistic style or whatever style they just naturally comes to them, what would be good advice for them right now?
Right now, in terms of the current climate, I mean, I wouldn't dare to give anyone advice about that. But in terms of just being a photographer, I think it's important to look at as much photography as possible outside of the discipline that you're aiming for. So if you're going into wedding photography, look at everything but other wedding photographers. I think. I mean, my inspiration for my kind of like evening photos is Larry Fink, who shot nightclubs and 50s and 60s and the Warhol scene and people like that. Doesn't help actually. I think it's detrimental to look at other wedding photographers if you're a wedding photographer. There's a whole world of images out there. Go to those. I
think that's great advice. Thanks for your time, Nick, and your advice, and all the best.
Thank you very much. Thank you for asking me.
Thanks for listening. I hope you took plenty away from that. Follow Nick on Instagram and check out his website. The link and links to some of the other things we spoke about today are in the show notes. I'd love to connect with you, and you can find me at the Viewfinder's webpage, where you can also get my free ebook, 3 Steps to Better Photographs. Again, links in the show notes. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and leave a kind review. That really makes a difference, especially in these early days of the show. And if you're a new listener, why not check out some other episodes? Thanks again. Enjoy your photography. I'll see you out there.